Hey, so my name is Noreen. I am one of the facilitators here today, and I do have a lovely counterpart. Her name is Tanya, and we will be facilitating this session. So welcome to concurrent session D2, addressing reincarceration of individuals with serious mental health. And before we get started, I do have a few housekeeping items to go over. The Zoom toolbar is located at the bottom of the screen, and we strongly encourage participants to use the Q&A feature to submit your questions. And this presentation will run for about 15 minutes. We'll have 5 to 7 minutes worth of Q&A and then 3 minutes to wrap up the session. So we will try our best to answer all your questions. If you are not on mute, I do encourage you to put yourself on mute. And this session is recorded and will be uploaded onto the portal, so you would have 90 days to view it. If you are looking for closed captioning, the CC icon is located below on your screen to access. And at the end of the session, we do want to ensure that participants complete the evaluation. You can complete the evaluation by going into the platform, clicking on the agenda, scrolling to the current session, and right next to join, you will see the survey button. And throughout the session, we encourage people to be thoughtful and be considerate of their words and impact. And any type of inappropriate behavior will not be tolerated. If you are affected by the content anyway, feel free to do what you need to do for yourself. Go for a walk, take a moment, take a breather. And if you require any additional support, you can connect with Connects Ontario. Their phone number is located in the FAQ icon on the conference. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Roland Jones. He is the medical head of the Forensic and Early Intervention Service from the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. Over to you.
Great, thank you. Welcome everyone, and thanks for coming to this session today. I'm delighted to present this topic, which I think is a very important topic in our field currently. So I'm a forensic psychiatrist. I work at CAMH, Center for Addiction and Mental Health. And as Noreen said, I'm the medical head for the Forensic Early Intervention Service, FICE, at CAMH. And I'm also a researcher. I work as an associate professor at University of Toronto and a scientist as well at CAMH. So without further ado, I'll go straight into this topic. And I'm going to start by setting the scene. So imagine being released from jail, stepping out through the gates into the cold night air with just a plastic bag and perhaps a few coins, a bus ticket, and your release papers. It might be late, 9 o'clock at night. There's no one there to meet you and you've got nowhere to go. You don't have a health card, and the medication that you were taking inside the jail, which did help with perhaps the paranoia or the voices, but you don't know what the medication is called. You're not even sure if you're supposed to carry on taking it. And right now, finding it isn't your top priority. And then 1 month later, you're back in jail for failing to attend court. And this is the reality for countless people around the world. And the reincarceration rate globally is very high. It's around 50 to 60% in 3 years. And people who have mental illness are at a particularly high risk of reincarceration. And I work as a forensic psychiatrist in two of the jails in Toronto, and I see this frequent return to custody. It's sometimes called the prison revolving door. And I see this at first hand, and it's prompted a line of research in this area to try to understand the issue a bit better. And also with my colleagues, the development of a new clinical service to help plug some of the gaps. So I'm delighted to be able to share today some of the things that I've discovered and hopefully some promising directions for the future. So the talk today is divided into four parts. I'll start off just with some background about people who have mental disorders in the incarcerated population. Then I'll move on to a study looking at the rates of reincarceration amongst people with serious mental illness and how the factors such as illness severity, homelessness, substance use, and gender play a role in that. Then I'll move on to a review of the literature. This is a systematic literature review that we did looking at the success of reintegration programs for people who have mental illness who are leaving correctional institutions. And then finally, I'll move on to talking about the CAMH Community Forensic Early Intervention Service. And this is a new service that's been operating for now just over a year. And I've got some early data to share with you about that. So I'll just give a little bit of background. I'm sure most of the audience here is familiar with many of the things I'm about to say here and in the next couple of slides, but I'll just give a summary of some of the issues facing people with mental disorders in correctional settings and give a brief overview as well as to the correctional system in Ontario. So worldwide, there's about 11 million people that are incarcerated at any one time. And the rate of incarceration isn't uniform across the globe. And you can see that Canada has an incarceration rate of about 114 per 100,000 people, which is towards the upper end of most Western countries. It's lower than Australia, lower than the United Kingdom and Spain. But all these countries are dwarfed by the incarceration rate in the USA, which has an incarceration rate of about 655 per 100,000. So as far as the correctional system in Ontario is concerned, there's 37 correctional institutions in Ontario. The first penitentiary was opened in Kingston in 1835, and this had a total capacity of a whopping 154. Now, on average, there's about 7,400 people, 7,400 adults at least, in custody every day in Ontario, and there's about 40,000 people that pass through the correctional institutions every year. The correctional service is divided, as I'm sure you're aware, into two separate systems, the federal and provincial system. The federal system has people who are incarcerated for 2 years or more, and this incorporates about 3% of all sentenced prisoners. So the majority would go into the provincial setting. Around about a quarter of sentenced individuals in the federal system are serving life sentences. As far as the provincial system is concerned, that contains individuals who are on remand. So that's about 70% of the population, with an average length of stay of about 43 days. And those who are sentenced, as I mentioned, it's those who have a sentence of less than 2 years. They comprise 30% of the provincial correctional population, and the average length of stay for the sentenced individuals is about 59 days. So you can imagine they're very busy places, lots of intake and discharges on a daily basis, and sometimes not too much opportunity for programming. In terms of the mental health of people incarcerated, it's well documented that worldwide the correctional population has a high proportion of people who have mental health problems. And the prevalence is about 4 to 7 times higher in jails in comparison to the general population. There've been quite a lot of studies on this. There's quite a highly cited meta-analysis by Professor Sina Pazel from Oxford, and putting together all of the world literature on the topic, they were able to arrive at prevalence figures which showed about 4% have a psychotic illness, such as schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. Around 10 to 14% have major depression. And although there's not a huge amount of research that's been carried out in Ontario,
Dr. Jones, you're muted. Can you unmute yourself?
sorry, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry about that. How long was I unmuted? Do I need to go back a little bit?
I think around 13% have at least two current severe symptoms.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm not sure how that happened. Sorry about that.
that's okay.
Yeah. So there's not a huge amount of research that's come out of Ontario recently, but Brown and colleagues carried out a study between 2005 and 2007 using an instrument called the RAI, the Resident Assessment Instrument, and they found that 13% of the jail population had at least two current severe symptoms of mental disorder. It's also known that the proportion of people with a mental health flag on their file, so it's not clear whether this is an actual diagnosis, but at least it's been flagged that the proportion of people who have a mental disorder has markedly increased from around 7% in 1999 to 33% in 2019. As far as females, women are concerned, around 7% of the incarcerated population worldwide are women, and they're the fastest growing proportion of people in jails. It grew by about 50% in 2000 in comparison to 20% increase in men. Previous literature has also shown that there are some differences between men and women who are incarcerated, with a higher prevalence of depression, psychological distress, self-harm, and drug dependence amongst women. So I'll now move on to the topic of reincarceration and what's known as the prison revolving door. So reoffending rates are generally high amongst individuals who are released from prison. However, the risk of reoffending is increased by about 40% amongst those who have a serious mental illness in comparison to those without mental illness. There was a large study by Largian and colleagues published in the American Journal of Psychiatry, and that indicated that over the preceding 6 years, there were high rates of reincarceration amongst the population. They found that individuals with a major mental illness were twice as likely to have had two or more previous incarcerations compared to people without a major mental illness, even after adjusting for other demographic factors and previous drug offences. And this highlights the strong association between reincarceration and mental illness. So in terms of other studies, there was a large population study that was published in the Lancet Public Health in 2023. And this was a national cohort of 82,415 community sentenced individuals. And they found that people who had a psychiatric illness had an increased rate of any and also violent offending. The rate amongst men was had a hazard ratio of 1.6, so a 60% higher rate of reoffending, and over a 70% higher rate of reoffending for women. And the associations also held after adjusting for all kinds of confounding factors. The highest risks were amongst those with schizophrenia spectrum disorders, personality disorders, and substance use disorders. But they did find that substance use disorders explained a lot of the excess risk in reoffending. They also found that most psychiatric disorders were not associated with increased risk in the absence of substance use disorders. So the big question is why? Why are we observing these increased rates amongst people who have a mental disorder? And are there specific needs of this population? Jennifer Scheme and colleagues has put a lot of thought into this topic and has published a couple of studies on this, and particularly those from 2011 and 2014, I'm drawing upon here. And Jennifer Scheme and colleagues indicated that there was a direct link. So a small subgroup of people who have mental illness, it's their symptoms of mental disorder that directly causes the criminal behavior, such as offences stemming directly from psychotic symptoms or disorganized thinking. There's also a second area, which is called the system response link. So in this group, mental illness doesn't itself increase criminality, but it leads to different treatment by the justice system. So, for example, there might be increased surveillance or sanctions that arise amongst this group. So it's how the system responds rather than the mental disorder itself. And thirdly, there's likely to be an indirect link through shared risk factors. So most individuals with mental illness would reoffend not because of the illness itself, but due to other criminogenic factors such as presence of substance use or having antisocial peers, criminal attitudes, prior offending, those sorts of things. So these factors are common, but perhaps more prevalent amongst a subgroup of those who have got mental illness. But the question is the relationship even more complex than that? Do people with mental illness simply have more risk factors that accumulate, or could it be that the risk factors interact in some way? So this brings me on to the second part of the talk. And this is a study that we carried out mainly towards the end of towards the end of last year and over the summer of this year. And Chloe Taylor, who's an undergrad at McMaster, did most of the analysis on this under my supervision. So we looked at the rates of reincarceration amongst people with serious mental illness, the role of illness severity, homelessness, substance use, and gender. So the aim of this study was to investigate how illness severity, homelessness, substance use, and gender affect reincarceration amongst those with serious mental illness. The hypothesis is that each risk factor independently increases the risk of reincarceration, but also that there's a combination or a combined fact that has a synergistic effect. So it's not just that the risk factors add up, they combine in such a way as to increase the risk of reincarceration. So we had data from the Forensic Early Intervention Service. This is a clinical service that's been running now for over 10 years in Toronto South Detention Centre and Barnier Centre for Women. And we do structured assessments and gather a lot of structured data, which we can then use for further analysis. We've had, I think, roughly 10,000 people now that have come through the service. And so we've got a lot of data points, which we're able to use for further analysis. So we looked at individuals who had schizophrenia spectrum or bipolar disorder, and those in which we'd had two or more referrals to the service. The measures that we use, primarily it's the JSAT or the Jail Screening and Assessment Tool. And that's a screening tool that's conducted on the first assessment by clinicians who are assessing individuals who come into the service or who are referred to the service. And the variables that we were interested in primarily for this study were homelessness, so whether the person was unsheltered, uh, such as living on the streets, or in accommodations such as shelters, or whether they had permanent housing. We looked at substance use and we divided those up into different categories of substances, such as opioids, stimulants, which includes methamphetamine and or crack cocaine, marijuana, and alcohol. And we looked at illness severity. We use a tool called the Clinical Global Impression for Corrections Scale, the CGIC. And this is a global impression rating scale. It's a fairly simple tool to complete. The overall symptom severity is rated on a scale of between 1 and 7. 1 to 3 is categorized as low severity, and 4 to 7 we categorized as high severity. And we also looked at gender, which was inferred from the facility. So there were two facilities, Varney Centre for Women and Toronto South Detention Centre. So we looked at location primarily as a variable. Without going into too much detail about the analysis, we carried out a model called a multivariate Cox proportional hazard model. So basically, we were looking at time to reincarceration. So from the point of release, we were looking at when that person, if they did come back, how long it was from the time of release to the time they were referred back to the service. Some people came in several times during the period of observation, so we were able to incorporate data from each of those times that someone came back into custody. So we modeled the main effects and we looked at the variables that I've mentioned as well to see to what extent any of those variables were associated with a faster rate of return to custody. In terms of the population that we studied, there were approaching 3,000 individuals with serious mental illness. There were 7,800 reincarceration events, and there was over 88,000 patient days or person days that we were able to analyze. 73% of the population was male and 27% was female. The age range was 18 to 83. There was high rates of homelessness amongst this population. About 45% experienced homelessness, and about 45% as well had a high mental illness severity at the point of release. Substance use was also quite high in this population, around 30% using alcohol. Opioids less common, around 5%, but stimulants were used frequently, 16% using crack cocaine and 22% methamphetamine, and around 37% were reporting using marijuana. So within a 2-year period, we found that 45% of individuals came back into custody. So it's a pretty high rate, but unfortunately much in line with previous studies and previous research. So jumping straight into the results, the things that stood out from this study, the most striking things I would say are that homelessness particularly was the standout risk factor for return to custody. So people who were homeless at the point of release had almost a 90% increased risk of returning to custody. Those who used stimulants as well, that was another significant risk factor, and they had almost a 40% increased risk of return to custody. So they were the two standout factors, so homelessness and stimulant use. We looked at mental illness severity, and perhaps contrary to my expectations and perhaps contrary to what I was observing clinically in the jail, we didn't find any direct relationship between the severity of the symptoms at the point of release and the rate of return to custody. There was a very slight relationship between age and return. So those who got older, or those who were older, had a slightly higher risk. And we looked at a gender as well, and didn't find a direct association between the rates of return to custody and gender. So the main things of note are homelessness and stimulant use. These factors, or these risk factors, they remained even after controlling for other variables in the model, and homelessness remained the standout and strongest risk factor for return to custody. We also looked at the interaction effects as well. So it stands to reason that if someone has got more than one risk factor, their risk of the outcome, in this case, risk of return to custody, increases proportionally. So if they've got one risk factor and a second risk factor, then both of those will add up to increase the risk. But there is a possibility that they don't just add up, but they also combine in such a way so that there's an interaction between the risk factors that increase the risk even further. So that was something that we wanted to look at. Was there a combination of these risk factors that made things even worse in terms of rates of return to custody? And what we found, in fact, that there was an increase due to interaction. And here we found that it was a relationship between stimulant use and mental illness severity. So this chart here, it's called a Kaplan-Meier survival chart. And this shows the proportion of people who have been released from jail and who are still out of custody, stratified by those who have either low or high CGI scores, and whether or not they use stimulants. And the plot shows that those who don't use stimulants have the lowest rate of reincarceration, irrespective of mental health symptom severity. But those who've got high symptoms and use stimulants have the worst outcome, and that's shown by the red line at the bottom of the chart. So what are the implications of this? Homelessness, in particular, and stimulant use, they strongly increase the reincarceration risk amongst people with mental health problems. And high mental illness severity amplifies the risk associated with stimulant use. So the interaction between these suggests the need for targeted interventions. And I suppose if you were looking at this population and looking at how you wanted to try to reduce the risk most effectively, then addressing homelessness would be the key thing. I would say addressing substance misuse, in particular those who are using substances, and also obviously treating those who have symptoms of mental illness, particularly if there's drug use in the picture. In terms of limitations of this study, we only measured people who came into two facilities, Toronto South Detention Centre and Varnia Centre for Women. There is a potential for under-reporting of reincarceration. So if they weren't referred back to FICE, our FICE service, for example, or if someone was reincarcerated to a different institution, we wouldn't have picked that up. And also there's a reliance on self-reported substance use measures, so there may be underreporting of that too. So I'm going to move on now to the third part of the talk. So what works to reduce reincarceration? This is a systematic review that we carried out fairly recently. It hasn't, it's been submitted but not yet published. So a systematic review of reintegration programs for people with severe mental illness who've been released from correctional institutions. And these are all the co-authors here, and the study was led by Professor Sandy Simpson at CAMH. But the question is, what is the evidence for reintegration practices for people with serious mental illness being released from criminal justice settings? And our objectives were to synthesize and evaluate studies on reintegration programs for people with serious mental illness, to focus on programs designed for transition from correctional facilities to the community, to identify promising practices and knowledge gaps in correctional mental health care, and to try to provide some directions for future research and policy development. So without going into all the details of the methodology, we carried out this review using standardized processes. We had a protocol which was registered. We followed recognized guidelines for doing a systematic review. And we searched a number of different databases, as well as looking at grey literature. So a pretty comprehensive search through the literature. We didn't have any restrictions on dates. So from the inception of the databases up until the time we completed the searches, which was in June last year. The population of interest was adults. We excluded youth for the purposes of this review. We also wanted to look at studies that spanned the discharge from the correctional facility. So things that started within the correctional facility and continued upon release. So we didn't want those that were just designed for people after they were released from custody. We looked at studies where there was a research design, so there must be a comparison group. It could be a pre-post design, or if there was a control group, such as matched controls or a randomized controlled trial. And as far as the outcomes were concerned, we were interested in if there was any changes in reported symptom severity for those who had mental illness, or functioning, levels of distress, levels of well-being, also service utilization as well, whether individuals were more likely to engage with health services, things like treatment adherence as well, and also return to custody or recidivism. This is just the diagram, which indicates that we found a lot of studies and then whittled it down from, I think, over 4,000 down to 26 studies that we identified and looked at in detail. So of those 26 studies, they fell into three major groups. Those that focused on community supports for general needs, such as case management, peer support, service navigators, assistance with interim housing. Then the largest group were those that studied mental health services, so community mental health services that had started or engaged with the individual before release. So they could be community mental health services, ACT teams, so assertive community treatment teams, or forensic assertive community teams. And then the third group, just to mention here, which perhaps has a little bit less relevance for the Canadian audience. There were US studies that were designed to improve access to health insurance. 11 of the studies were of longitudinal design, and there were 7 randomized controlled trials, which indicates the highest level.
I just logged into one of the last ones.
So I'll go through each of the areas in turn. The 4 studies here were those that investigated community supports. The first study I'll just mention is the Bellamy study. There was 300 people included in that. And this was a peer mentoring program which lasted over 2 years, so a quite intensive program. But this had quite a high success rate. The reincarceration rate improved from 22% from 43% in the general population to 22% in the treatment group. There was another quite impressive study that by Carr, which was a longitudinal study including 613 people, and they also found lower rates of reincarceration amongst those that participated in the program. Again, this was quite an intensive program. It was a day reporting centre which provided vocational training, accommodation assistance, and psychiatric support. There was one randomized control trial in this group, which I'll mention. So it was carried out to a very high standard. This was Shaw et al. From 2017, and they had 150 people included in this. And this is a study using what's known as critical time intervention. So this is short-term intensive case management to try to address various needs, including social care and other things post-release. So it was short-term, but they had follow-up of periods of 6 weeks, 6 months, and 12 months. And they didn't find actually any increase or any improvement in reincarceration rates, but they did find that there was an improvement in service engagement. So individuals were more likely to have got a GP, family doctor, more likely to have engaged with services, but it didn't seem to impact rates of reincarceration. Moving on to the next section, which is studies that involved community mental health services. So I've included in this slide 6 of the randomized controlled trials. So again, those with the highest level of evidence. There was also some success here too, primarily, I would say, in the most intensive of services. The first 2 on the slide here, Sachs et al., they had a modified therapeutic community. So this obviously provided a high level of support, but they found that there were lower reincarceration rates amongst those who participated in this. There was some rather mixed evidence from other studies. The Solomon study was an ACT sort of community treatment team compared against a forensic individual case management against community mental health centre. And they actually found that those who had the ACT intervention had a higher rate of reincarceration in comparison to the others, which was perhaps contrary to what was expected. Other studies didn't really find very much between groups in terms of reincarceration, but some did find improvements again in engagement with services, but not, as I say, with reincarceration. And then just to mention the health insurance ones, these are studies primarily carried out in the USA, and they were studies that were designed to improve access to health insurance, Medicaid, in the US. And they found they weren't really designed to look at reincarceration rate, but most of them found an improvement in enrollment and therefore better access to healthcare. So the key outcomes and key outcome patterns that we identified in the systematic review is that integrated pre and post release models do improve service engagement and can improve continuity of care. Therapeutic communities and case management offered low reoffending rates when aftercare was completed. The ACT-style programs, however, showed mixed and sometimes negative results. And it's also worth saying that the gains in engagement often didn't translate to continued improvement or improvement in reincarceration rates. Peer mentoring and similar services, the community support interventions, did improve stability and engagement. And pre and post planning did improve housing and mental health links, but didn't result in cuts in reincarceration rate. I think one of the main things to notice really is that the success was tied to the length of intervention. So the more intensive programs did appear to have the greatest success. So intensity, high dose programs showed better outcomes. Those that addressed multiple needs, such as housing, employment, and treatment, they had somewhat better success. Those that had coordination between programs, so cross-agency collaboration, they had more success than those that were focused on a single outcome. There was some indication that targeting particular populations, such as individuals who have substance misuse needs, had more effect. And then the duration as well, so longer periods of support, so longer than 6 months, were more likely to be associated with sustained positive outcomes. So overall, the evidence is quite patchy. It is quite difficult research to do, but it does at least give us some indication as to some of the programs that have been successful, particularly related to perhaps indications about the intensity and duration of the services that are needed post-release. So I'm just going to move on now to the final part of the talk, and this is the service that we have developed in Toronto, which is an extension of our forensic early intervention service that is carried out within the custodial setting in Toronto South Detention Centre and Barnier Centre for Women. So we noticed that the service has been running for about 10 years now, and we noticed that many individuals unfortunately do come back into the service after being stabilised within the jail setting. And we wanted to provide an extension to the service to provide access to psychiatrists in the community, because very often we were finding that the people that we were treating and helping, although they were getting medication in the jail, they didn't have a psychiatrist or a community mental health team or anyone, in fact, to prescribe. So we wanted to provide a service that provided rapid access to a psychiatrist, and also to provide case management on things such as medication follow-up, assistance with navigating the system to try and get housing, finances such as OW and ODSP, and other social supports. So we developed a pilot service initially running for the first year, and our criteria were these. So the individuals would have a diagnosis of a major mental illness. They were currently on our caseload within the jail. They provided consent to receive the service. There was no obligation for any follow-up. They need to be living in the Toronto area, mainly to be able to access the services, to come to the clinic for the follow-up appointments, although we have in fact had people that have been living quite far afield. And in fact, we've had someone traveling several hours to come to their initial appointment to get some follow-up. And then the final thing is that they don't already have a service provider. We're not trying to duplicate or double up or take clients from anywhere else. It's purely if someone doesn't have another service that they can turn to, that we would try to provide this model. Because it was an early pilot, our resources were and are still quite minimal. So we have a capacity of a maximum of 20 clients that we can manage. We have one full-time equivalent case manager, and that's divided into 50% time from a nurse and 50% time from a social worker. We have 1 day of physician time, so 2 half days, half day on a Monday and half on a Friday. And the idea was to provide service for up to 4 months. That was what we initially envisaged, because we estimated that there was going to be quite high demand, and we wanted to try and get a throughput and to find other services for individuals so that we could pass them on to another community mental health service, to an ACT team, or at the very least onto a GP to continue the prescribing. Some of the key features are that engagement happens whilst in custody. So there are individuals who are already on our caseload. We invite them to consider follow-up with a FICE community team. So we're able to have that level of continuity. It's a familiar face. Often the person who does the assessment on intake in community FICE is the same person that's been speaking to them whilst they're in custody. So that level of continuity really helps. Access to a psychiatrist, which is, I think, unique within the services that I'm aware of, at least. So we're able to provide a psychiatric assessment usually within the week, sometimes the following week, but in pretty short order, we could do that to prescribe the medication and continue the medications that the person was likely getting in custody. Some of the advantages as well is that because they're already known to our service, we've already got a lot of relevant medical information, and there's liaison with the Toronto South Detention Centre and Barnier healthcare teams. So that's something we're able to help to avoid getting delays in treatment, because we're familiar with that information and what medication someone might be getting. Also, development of housing partnerships. Partnerships might be too strong a word in some respects, but having that relationship with housing partnerships has really helped, because, as we all know, I think housing is a real difficult area for this population to access, and some of the personal relationships that our team have been able to get so far with housing providers, I think, has been really beneficial. And also that same relationship with community mental health providers. We've had some success there as well, where some mental health teams got to know us and got to know our practices, and we've been able to develop some relationships there as well. It's quite heavy in terms of measurement, because we wanted to evaluate the service very thoroughly. So I won't go through all of these, time doesn't allow, but we carry out a lot of measures on admission and during recurrent sessions, and also on discharge, partly to look at the level of need of our group, and also to evaluate whether there's any benefit from our service. So I'll very quickly walk you through some of the data from the first year. So remember, this is a small service. We started small and have grown up to the full capacity caseload now of 20. And when we pulled this data, which was a few months, 2 or 3 months back now, there were 79 total clients referred. There were 16, there's 20 actually as of today currently active. 12 had completed service and transitioned to the community. But despite our best efforts, many had dropped out of care. We had 21 that had dropped out of care, and 11 of those were reincarcerated. And also, we had 16 no-shows for the initial appointment, and 7 of the 16 were reincarcerated. So there's still lessons to be learned about how we're providing the service, how it's set up, and what we can do better, really, to try to meet the needs of this population. In terms of demographics, 90% were male, average age of about 40. Almost everyone had a diagnosis of schizophrenia or schizophrenia spectrum disorder, a mixture of those who were on oral medication and those on long-acting injections. Without going into many of the different measures that we use, I just wanted to mention this one in particular. This is the Camberwell Assessment of Need, and this is a self-report questionnaire going through different domains of need, asking individuals, what they perceive their needs as. And I think this highlights to me that sometimes the things that we are most concerned about as doctors and nurses and clinicians are not necessarily the same things that our population that we're serving it really needs. So there is a gap there in terms of what we we have to think a bit more broadly and how we try to address these needs. So the standout things here are in terms of the domains of need as self-reported by the people that came to our service, daytime activities, so having more things to do, having more company, intimate relationships, things around digital communication, and to some extent benefits and money as well. Surprisingly, accommodation was quite low on that list, but I think that's probably because the population that we were seeing on their first intake, we'd already lined people up with access to accommodation, so that at least there was a safe bed or some form of housing that the person had access to. So we've had many that were assisted with obtaining documentation for identification, 17 assisted with employment supports, 13 assisted with obtaining basic startup items such as clothing, hygiene products, 26 were assisted with applying for financial supports. We had 20 referrals to community mental health services, 22 to connect with GP. 39 were housed, 7 in safe beds or transitional housing, and 10 referrals we made to addiction services as well. And we had some really nice testimonials as well, individuals who had been perhaps unhoused for many years, lost contact with family, reporting that they'd made contact then with family and were grateful to have some support. So I'm aware of the time, so I'm going to end there. We would like to extend the service and continue it, and we've got some ideas now of what works, and what we need to improve on. Overall, homelessness and drug use are significant problems for our population, and that's something we really need to try and address in combination with treating symptoms of mental illness. In terms of what worked from the evidence, it's quite mixed, but it does seem that integrated pre and post-release programs, those with high dose, high intensity, work better. And the way forward is to build a better cross-sectional or cross-sector collaboration, try to invest in comprehensive and sustained transition services, focusing on housing, substance use, and severe mental illness, and also try to, if we can, evaluate all this and carry out research so that we know best what works, so that we can then guide scalable and evidence-based services. So I'll end there, and I'll open up to any questions.
Thank you so much. So if folks do have questions, we do invite you to use the Q&A option in Zoom. Lovely to see the applause.
Okay, so I'm just looking into the Q&A. There's no question in the Q&A. So if anyone would like to open their mic and ask any questions or put them in the chat, I'm not sure if that's possible as well. Okay, thank you. So Rebecca's asked a question about looking at grey literature and whether I can expand on use of grey literature. Yeah, so basically what we did as a standard part of carrying out a systematic review, some of the information, particularly in this field, is often not reported, or it may not be reported in some of the peer-reviewed journals. So it's not going to be found doing the searches in the main databases. So the purpose of doing the grey literature is to look at all those other sources. So it might be things such as correctional services, reports, looking on websites, other services that might have done an evaluation, which they hadn't published in a formal manner. So the idea was to spread or cast the net as wide as possible to make sure that we didn't miss any of those studies that might have been written about elsewhere but not formally published. So there's lots of questions now that come up. So you mentioned intellectual and developmental delay. So what work are you doing? Chris Dobson has asked this question. What work are you doing to get intellectually developmentally delayed out of forensic hospital? Does early intervention work apply to this population? Yeah, I mean, it's a really great question. As far as the forensic early intervention service is concerned, primarily the population that we serve have diagnoses of major psychosis, major mental illness. But that said, we do see people quite frequently who do have a developmental delay, and there is a dearth of services, as I'm sure this question implies, for this population. So it's something I think we haven't really addressed all that well to date. Individuals who do have a mild developmental delay are certainly eligible to come to our small and pilot community forensic early intervention service. But we'd very much be trying to lean on other sectors as well to try to help with this population. So I agree with what's implied by this question. It's very much an area of need and something that we need to do better with this population. Another question, I'm interested to hear why pre-release planning is not helpful for reducing the risk of reincarceration. Is it due to the lack of follow-through after release? Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think pre-release planning is bound to be helpful, but in the studies that we were able to identify, it does seem to be that that's probably in itself not enough. So follow-up post-release, I think, is essential or necessary for that as well. And the more support, the more intensity, the better. Bear in mind that the population that we were interested in surveying for this data were those with mental illness. So we didn't survey the population, survey the studies that might have been carried out for the general jail population. This was specifically for those who have mental health problems. So pre-release planning is certainly helpful, but the more intense the service post-release, I would say the better in terms of the evidence that's been identified.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Jan said, why do I skip over the lessons learned? I was just very aware that the time was almost out. But if you'd like to contact me directly, I'd be very happy to have a chat with you or share the lessons learned. I think we're almost out of time now. Otherwise, I probably could have elaborated a little bit more. But great questions, and thanks to everyone for their attention today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Roland Jones, for your informative presentation, as well as thank you to everyone here for their insightful questions. So definitely we want everyone to fill out the survey. So please go ahead and click on the agenda, scroll to the session and fill out the survey for this session. And please join us in our closing remarks. Thank you, everyone, and have yourself a good day.